Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is from the incredible mind of DragonManMike over on Reddit No Sleep. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I'll Never Walk Sutton Wilderness in the Dark Again. Let's get straight into that. The sun wouldn't rise for another hour when I leashed up my dog for our walk. You see, my wife and I started going to the gym on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. Last week our trainer wanted us to add cardio to our routine, and so Tuesdays and Thursdays became our cardio days. Our gym was small, and with only one treadmill working at the moment, I opted to get my exercise later in the day, via a hike through the nearby urban wilderness. I figured this would also be an excellent opportunity to walk our dog, Penny. Fall showed no signs of coming early to Oklahoma as we stepped outside to the 75-degree heat. With all the lakes in the Gulf Stream, Oklahoma can get unbearably humid. On Tuesday, when I did the walk at 10 AM, I felt sweaty enough to want to take a second shower from a 40-minute hike. Today, I opted to start at 6 AM before I'd shower and match my wife's time at the gym. Despite the dark, there were several cars parked in a lot for the Sutton Wilderness. Goes to show that the Sutton goatman isn't real. I joked. I had heard of the urban legend about the goatman stalking the woods at night, but that was the extent of my knowledge until I listened to a local podcast that went in more in depth. The host described the story as one that echoed other goatman stories across the nation. His research compared the sightings of woodland monsters, like Bigfoot, through a cultural lens, with people from British backgrounds familiar with ape men, werewolves from Germanic history, and the goatman from the Dutch. Similar to other goatman stories, this creature existed near a hospital, or in this case, of Sutton Wilderness, a psychiatric ward. The urban wilderness was once grounds for the Griffin Memorial Hospital, an old Central State mental hospital. As the hospital shrunk, the state turned the landscape into the park people enjoy today. According to urban legends, the hospital found a baby deformed with horns to the point that they thought the child was a goat at first. The hospital cared for the baby, and as the child grew up and the landscape changed, the child decided to stay here. And the podcast host noted that this would put the goatman well over 70 years old, and said that some people believe the spirit of the goatman is what haunts the woods. Regardless of form, the legend warns that people will hear footsteps made by hooves coming from behind them. If a person walked faster or slower, the steps would match their pace until one would feel hot breath on their neck, by which time you were too late. Or if you turned around, the goatman would grab you and drag you deep into the woods, never to be seen again. Well, the main trail for the park was about 1.5 miles long, with 2 main entrances looping back at a wooden pavilion. We took the path to our right. Although it was dark, I could barely see with all the tree coverage. I was more concerned about my dog eating something that she shouldn't than anything else. The city had widened the trails a couple of years ago to give people more space when crossing each other and reduce the tick population. And then my dog stopped. Her ears perked up and turned to the south towards the rhythmic beat of drums off in the distance. I tugged on her leash and assured her, "It's just a high school band practicing, Penny." I was over a third of the way on the trail before I encountered my first person. They appeared to be an older gentleman, hard to say with a blue disposable face mask, long sleeve shirt, pants and fisher hat they wore. I nodded my head hello, and they walked past without saying a word. When we got to the long straight path near the pond, something behind us caught my dog's attention. I turned around and there was a white light floating through the bushes, moving fast along the trail and getting closer. I'm ashamed to admit that my brain took a long moment before realizing this was a headline from a bike. In my defense, bicycles were not allowed on the trails. I pulled Penny closer to me as we moved to the side to let them pass. Penny and I came to the final stretch of the woods, which had the thickest tree coverage. Penny's tail curled inwards as she got closer to my side. An educational sign about life in the woods highlighted the various animals that one could find, such as bark beetles, ornate box turtles, cedar waxwings, bobcats, eastern wood rats, and downy woodpeckers. Back away from the sign was a hut made out of fallen tree branches. I always viewed this as fairy house, as something fun for the kids to explore, but not today. There were pieces of the bike I saw earlier scattered on the ground. The bike looked like it had been mangled by some machine, as no person or creature could do that kind of damage. And I turned on my phone's flashlight. While I stayed put on the paved trail, I used the light to follow the bike pieces to the hut. And something moved inside. I cut away the shadows with my light and revealed a pair of green eyes reflecting at me. I ran, and so did Penny. I was struggling to keep up with her, but I had her on the leash still. And behind us, I heard what sounded like hooves matching my pace on the paved trail, and I dared not look back. The sun was rising as we made our escape out of the woods and back to the gazebo. With the sound of hooves gone and no warm breath on my neck, I stopped to catch my breath. And staying behind in the trees was someone about my height. I thought I saw horns like a goat, but as I tried to get a good look at them, they faded into the shadows. The creature of Hollyburn Mountain. Let's get straight into that. So, to preface this story, this happened to my grandfather in the 1940s. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's a story he had told me many times throughout my life. He claims this is entirely true, and though yes, it may have changed through retellings, but the facts of the matter never changed. So, our story takes place on Hollyburn Mountain, and for those of you who are not from Vancouver, that's one of the North Shore Mountains bordering Vancouver, British Columbia. And back in the 1940s, this was a popular location for people to have a getaway cabin for skiing, hunting, and other outdoor activities. My grandfather Ian owned one such cabin far up the south slope of Hollyburn, an area that is now part of the provincial park. The only way to get up to this cabin was to take a chairlift and then ski or hike down through the dense woods to the cabin. It was probably the most isolated you could get while still seeing Vancouver's lights at night. It was late March where, down in the city, the snow was melting and spring was in full effect. But up the mountain, it was still deep winter, and so, in order to get some last-minute winter fun, they all headed up to the cabin for a weekend of skiing and general fun. They met up in a parking lot just below the ski lift and hoisted their gear onto backpacks and sleds. Back in the 1940s, external frame backpacks were just becoming popular, and so they were all loaded up with food, supplies, and other gear. Taking a lift up the mountain, they skied down to the cabin just before it started to get dark. Now, what you have to know about this cabin is that it was small and the 5 men sharing that night were pretty cramped inside. But the bunk beds offered enough sleeping space for all, while leaving enough room to move around. As the night rolled on, Grandpa and his friends had some drinks, cooked some steaks on the old potbelly stove in the cabin, and generally had a good time. They were looking forward to 2 full days of skiing and enjoying one last winter getaway before spring spread up the mountains. And by midnight, they were all asleep with the fire still smouldering in the old iron stove. It was cold that night, not bitterly cold like winters up north, but it was pretty south of freezing. And so, everyone was wrapped up tight in blankets and old-style-down sleeping bags. Everyone was awoken by a loud boom, like something very heavy or very strong had hit the side of the cabin. My grandpa told me that at first he thought it was an avalanche, but then there was another boom, and this time on the roof. and hard enough to make the whole structure shake. By this time, everyone was awake, some scrambling out of bed, tangled in blankets, but everyone was pretty panicked. My great-uncle Alistair, then only 18, grabbed the hunting rifle that they had brought, just in case early rising bears became an issue. The cabin shook again. Boom, boom. And then they heard a sound that was unlike anything they'd ever heard before. It was somewhere between a human scream, a cougar's call, and a lion's roar. Grandpa said everybody froze then. The banging and booming stopped then. But there was something outside, and they could see it pacing through the snow outside the cabin, walking on top of it like it was weightless. Its form was blacker than the night forest around it. They couldn't make out the shape other than it was vaguely humanoid, and it walked on all fours. I had skirted around some trees, and then they heard that horrible scream again. And this time the banging was centered on the roof, like whatever was trying to break into the cabin was doing it through the ceiling. This continued, the screaming and banging for some minutes. No one knew how long, but it felt like hours, when suddenly it stopped. The group of grown men, some veterans, were all huddled in terror on the floor in the middle of the cabin, each holding some kind of weapon, improvised or otherwise. That's when something started scraping at the windows. Like nails on the chalkboard, it tapped and scraped down the glass of the only window in the tiny cabin.
"Come out, come out,"
the thing chanted in a voice that was very strangely distorted. And then, without warning, another bang on the side of the cabin. Like the men's lack of response infuriated the creature.
"Come out,"
it yelled in that deep, distorted voice. That's when the door rattled and banged, and the men thought that this was the end of it. But as soon as this attack started, it ended, and whatever had accosted their cabin just stopped, and the only sounds that were left in the cabin were the gentle cracks of flames and the panicked breathing of the 5 men. They sat there on the floor, back to back, in a circle, until the sun came out above the mountains. They packed their things and got out of there as fast as they could. But they noticed, upon leaving the cabin and locking it up, the deep gouges in the logs that make up the cabin walls and the tracks in the snow. Not quite human, but not animal either. Whatever that thing was, whatever had wanted them to come out, was not human. They left the side of that mountain as fast as they could, and my grandpa never returned to that cabin for an overnight stay. In fact, he would sell it that summer. Years later, I told this story to a friend of mine, whose father is a Squamish Nation shaman. Retelling the take to my friend's father, he told me that my grandpa was lucky that he and his friends had been protected by the strong construction of the cabin. He could not tell what it was specifically, but he says it might have been a spirit that was angry over some desecration to its land. Or it could have been a witch, a skinwalker, though the Salish and Squamish have another word for it. Either way, this creature is still reported occasionally by campers and hikers on the North Shore mountains. Not everyone has such a violent experience as my grandpa's, but be careful for those of you who camp overnight in the woods outside Vancouver. You could not be alone. Wow. Short but absolutely chest-pounding and chilling encounters. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, guys. And of course, please do like and share. It really does help both the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the brand new contact email, which is, as on screen, contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. If you're looking to support the show further, don't forget we have a merch store, which is constantly being updated. Why not treat yourself or a loved one to a real creepy treat just in time for Halloween? Your support is very much appreciated. As ever, guys and girls, I hope you're all well and happy and fighting fit. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.